right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be exploring growing a healthy relationship with your own power. And some of our introductory questions to tune to is, do you walk away from conversations frustrated because you didn't say what you were really thinking or feeling? And do you feel like you muzzle yourself and don't speak your truth? And do you have personal or professional relationships where you don't feel like you're heard and don't feel comfortable speaking up? And as my guest today, Anissa Centers, and I've been exploring this, one of the things that we've landed on, haven't we, about this exploration of power within, the personal power, and then the power with, and how that's so much different than being overpowered as so much of business and professional personal life can be. Welcome,
Absolutely.
Anissa. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really, really excited about this topic because I've personally struggled with it and still do because I'm human. And I've seen a lot of people over the years struggle with the concept of power, and they just don't want any part of it, is what they pretty much end up deciding. And then they have all these unhealthy boundaries, if they have boundaries at all. And they do leave conversations frustrated, or they're uncomfortable in their own skin in their workplaces or even in their own relationships. And so when you started talking with me about this and we started pinpointing exactly what it was like, the sky opened up and the angels sang. It was like, it felt glorious.
You said something there I wanted to amplify. They decide they don't want any part of it. And I think that's one of the things that I was so attracted to your work and your mission in the world, is that you're exposed to people, particularly young women, who you can sense and feel that they have oomph to them. They have a power to them, but there's something that they're saying, I don't want to have any part of that. Can you talk a little bit more
Yes.
about what you're feeling from them, what they're saying
Yes.
no to?
Yes. So that our guests understand where I'm coming from. I'm a television news anchor and have been so for approximately 25 years. And I've worked in large markets and small markets. And by virtue of what I do, I'm invited to do a lot of interaction with colleges, universities, high schools, elementary schools, middle schools, business groups, women's groups, general groups. But the thing that I've zeroed in on, the thing that struck my heart the most, is how many of those, particularly young women, I see it in people in general, but particularly young women who want to do so much. They want to impact the world. They're go-getters, they're enthusiastic, they're talented, and there's this weird push-pull for them. They're driven and they'll move forward, and then they'll catch themselves, and it's almost like, oh, no, I should not be doing that. And when you talk with them, it feels, when you're looking at them in a professional environment. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
I can.
In a professional environment,
that's me tapping, because this is a big deal for me.
Yeah, because it's bringing up something.
It's bringing up my
own
intensity.
Me too. My chest just tightened because I am that person. Right? I was that young woman. But what it is that from the outside, for a person who's not being very observant or someone who's not intuitive, you see this confident person. But when I talk with them individually and they pull me to the side, they talk about how they just don't feel like they're getting it, or you can see there's a certain amount of timidity to them. And what I figured out it is they are not comfortable with power, theirs or anyone else's. And what they'll do is they'll work off of, like following your bliss and living your mission, and they'll be going, and they're moving forward and they're speaking up, or they're just working behind the scenes because they're different personality types. And then they'll hit this space where it just doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
They don't feel comfortable. Either they spoke up in a room full of, and I'm not picking on men when I say this, this is a trigger for some people, say a room of middle-aged men in suits, and they spoke up and they disagreed. And that was what was in their hearts. And then immediately after, there's this constriction, this, oh, I shouldn't have done it. And you'll see them start apologizing or shutting down. And what it is they're just not comfortable exercising their inherent power, and they'll back away from it. And you'll catch a lot of that apologizing. They'll kind of put their heads down, or they'll shrink into themselves, or sometimes even they'll go the opposite direction. They'll try to bluster their way through it and embrace this masculine concept of power that they've been trained to think that that's how the business world works. And it still doesn't feel good, and it's not sustainable.
As you've been out in the business world, how much do you think the business world is just that power over and the kind of the traditional at this point, versus we haven't really landed on our new concepts of power? I mean, that person, the young, let's say using the example of a young woman, and she's really clear, she's professional, she's competent, and she has something that needs to be added to the business. There's an aspect of this that isn't just go along to get along, and she speaks up. If there were 20 men in that room, and obviously other women, how much of a reception is she actually getting for that kind of expression?
That's the interesting thing about it. I found that it depends on the way she approaches it.
Okay.
The normal way, the traditional, I won't say normal because normal implies that it's the correct way. The traditional way of approaching it is, I put my big girl panties on, I straighten up my spine, I exude a presence, and then I just take over the room. I have to say it in a slightly aggressive way, right? Well, often, if you can be the biggest bully in the room, it'll appear as though people are listening to you. But if that's not your style, then sometimes you'll see it go over like a lead balloon, and you'll see that brush off, that kind of patting on the head. Oh, you're so pretty. That kind of just dismissive attitude. And when I've trained and mentored, and I've actually taught classes about this, and what I found to be most effective is for there to be a reframe from within for the person who's doing the speaking. And I found that if we can change the perspective we have on power and explain, and so that they understand that it doesn't mean that I have to be the biggest bully in the room. It doesn't mean that I have to be the loudest. It doesn't mean I have to be the most masculine. It doesn't mean I have to be the most aggressive. What I need to do is to make sure I'm expressing myself in a way that feels comfortable for me, and a way where I am not feeling like I'm trying to push someone into something that's not good for them. So what I do is we talk about how is what you're proposing good for you and good for them. And then we address it from that perspective. And it goes over phenomenally. Almost everyone leaves the room feeling good about it. And it's effective. And that's what power is. Power is nothing more than influence. It's not aggression. Some people get it that way, but it's nothing more than influence. And we influence people all the time, whether we're holding back or not. We influence just by our presence and being a part of the energetic mix in the room.
So I'm hearing that the reframe from within goes to the crux of what brings us together, I think. And from the practical part of me really wants to feel that even more deeply, to understand this as a way of relating. And I love the fact that you have seen this, you've seen the different dynamics, whether done by men or women, where it's that hierarchy, who can project the most status versus who has that power within themselves, and they're sharing that from a different frame of reference. I'd love for you to go a little deeper into what the, if you're with someone professionally and they've been enculturated into the old style, how we go from the old style of power, dominance, bully, aggressive, put your big boy pants on. How do you take them to a place where they're in a different way? different mindset, heart set.
What immediately comes to mind is a particular client of mine who was uncomfortable talking about how uncomfortable someone made her. It was because sometimes in news, and this was somebody I was working with who just so happened to be in the news business, news can be very and cut and dry.
Okay.
Get to it. We only have a certain amount of time. I only have a certain amount of time. And it can be a rude business, to say the least. And I'm trying to think of a polite way to say this, but it was hindering her ability to express herself and grow and present story ideas and to explain what was taking place when she was crafting a piece of work. And so what I had her do was understand that everybody, and this part of this comes from my husband was a top sales executive at a Fortune 500 company. Everybody responds to what benefits them, if you can explain to them how it benefits them. Everybody. Some people say it's selfish, whatever. It's the way it works. We're very open to things that help us. And so as I was talking with her, I said, you know what I'm figuring out from you is that you don't want to come across as weak. You don't want to come across as, oh, you're hurting my feelings. And I said, well, let's look at it this way. If we can reframe it for him or her, I think it just so happened to be a male manager, but it's happened with female managers. I said, oh, why don't you approach it from this and say, I understand that you want to get the most from me. Over the years, I figured out that a slightly more hands-off approach or a slightly less aggressive approach means that you'll get more out of me because I want to perform at my highest level. And I know you want me to perform at my highest level. So if you would just kind of hold off and maybe count for a couple of seconds before you say that, then it won't take me out of my headspace where I'm being most productive.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah.
How have you used that? Is there an example that you feel comfortable sharing about how you've tapped into your power within? I mean, to me, what benefits them, unless we're just totally selfless and we're offering things that have no benefit to us at all, just to benefit others. But if I'm selfish enough that if I'm offering something, it also benefits me. So that it fits the power with. But do you have an example of where you've used this?
Let me think about that. Let me think about it. Because I have personal examples and there are professional examples. I have used this professionally. I despise contract negotiations with a fiery passion. I mean, I would rather have my insides dragged along a highway and run over by an 18-wheeler than talk with somebody about how I deserve more money. It's just,
yeah.
I mean, it's just.
So there's a little bit of tappable discomfort there.
Oh, we could tap for hours on that. I have tapped for hours on that. And it was interesting because I'm really grateful for my husband's background because his attitude is, just ask for it. What are they going to say? No? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what if they say no? They'll think I'm greedy. They'll think I'm selfish. Oh, they'll think I'm a diva. Oh my God. It's just, and it went like that because television, most television people, especially in front of the camera, work under contract. And so we're talking about me doing this at age like 23. That was not a comfortable sensation.
Yeah.
So what I've figured out over the years after talking with him, and the reframe for me often was when I'm talking with people and say, you know what, in order for this to be a great working relationship, and we want it to be a great working relationship, you're going to have to feel like you're getting what's best for you, and I'm going to feel like I'm getting what's best for me, and it's going to have to feel fair. We're going to have to leave here feeling good about it so that we can move forward. And I was like, if I work under these conditions, it's not going to feel good for long. And I'm concerned that I won't be able to give you what you deserve. And yes, I practice those conversations. Write them out, practice them. And because I teach this in courses, and I'm surprised that more people don't do it this way, but it took me a while to figure it out. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that as I'm practicing it and I'm noticing what I'm feeling, and then I'm anticipating what they might possibly say, because there are a number of things they could say.
Sure.
Then eventually I feel comfortable enough to where when I open my mouth, I'm not when I'm doing it.
I remember when you brought
worked.
this up during our initial conversations on this subject, and I remember that if I'm remembering correctly, if you're working with a client, and I assume also practicing it for yourself, that if something comes out of your mouth that isn't really you, that's one thing. And then there's something coming out of your mouth that's really uncomfortable and it's really you. How do you practice the different, I mean, how does that come into the practice dynamic? You know, you might want to say something that you know that they would like to hear, but it's really not who you are.
Yeah. Because it's not going to be a long-term solution, because if it's not you, it's not sustainable. That is a core foundational belief for me. If it's not you, it's not sustainable. What
happens if it's not you, and
then
you keep doing it?
If you keep doing it, one, it's going to eat away at you, and you're not going to feel good about it. And eventually, even if it is successful, you won't continue doing it, because that's human nature. If it doesn't feel good, if it consistently feels bad, and I mean that build on kind of bad, you won't do it. It's almost like dieting. That deprivation works if you keep it up, but you're hungry.
Yeah.
And if you're hungry, you're going to eat.
As you look at the people coming into the business, particularly those of younger ages and the like, what are you noticing that they're doing that's not sustainable? I mean, I know that as I listen to college age people and people in their 20s and even early 30s, that there is a different mindset. But there's also some things that just don't feel sustainable, and I can't always put my finger on it. I'm curious what you're noticing, particularly related to power, and how they're using it and not using it.
Give me an example if you're out and about, or so that I can get a bead on what you're referencing.
Okay, so like one of the antidotes to not speaking up can be radical honesty. There's even books on it. And so I've noticed that some people coming up through that, they will need to be heard, and need to be heard in their most radically honest self. And I have a question about the sustainability of that, especially in a power with. And that's just an example of one of those things where that's different than the kind of reference from within reframe, as I try that on. Reframe from within way that you're talking about it. But there is also some wisdom in it. Like, it does get you speaking.
Yeah. But it doesn't always get you saying what is of benefit to you. I recognize what you're talking about. I've seen it. I've seen it a lot, actually, now that you mention it. And actually, and there are a lot of, I call them adults, because they're adults too, but I mean, but older people closer to my generation, who do that as you, like you said, an antidote to feeling powerless, because they don't want to feel powerless. So they'll it's another way of dominating a conversation. and dominating it is not productive, because what I've noticed with that particular characteristic that you're talking about is they've grown up during those fundamental developmental social years, idolizing people who seem to be getting attention and getting what they want doing that. And it's still not them.
And it's still not them.
Still not them. Because when I started out doing motivational speaking, I was really into everybody embracing, that inner bad chick or successful dude or whatever the case was. And then I realized that's not everybody's style. Yeah, I'm flapping my gums all the time. I'm exceptionally energetic much of the time in social situations. And in many ways, that's just who I am. But that is not everybody else's version of tapping into your power and being yourself. So now what I share with people and help them cultivate is them getting in touch with feeling those sensations in their bodies, figuring out what that yes feels like, and then adapting your behavior, building your repertoire of tools and skills and social abilities around that. Because you can be powerful in an exceptionally quiet way if that's who you are.
So that impacts me to hear you say that. I, as someone who can go both ways, to be exceptionally quiet, and I do talk a lot. I'm blessed with platforms and energy and attention. How are you feeling a calling as being someone who has that vibrancy and can get attention? As you feel into your community, the ecosystem around you, what are you doing? Are you called to do anything to change the space and how things are related, so that those people that are, they're tuned into their authenticity, but that, I don't know, sometimes we don't listen to them.
Right?
Don't even notice them.
Sometimes we don't, because we're not always tuned in. Yeah.
Jean asked, how can you be powerful if you're quiet?
Thank you so much for asking that question. So as I was talking with you earlier in our conversation about power, and I remembered you said, write down a few things you would like people to understand about power. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that came out, and it felt so true, it was like this soothing breeze just flowing through my body, is that power is inherent. You have it whether you choose to have it or not. It's not aggression. It's not any of those things we've had modeled for us or told it was. Power is nothing more than influence. That's all it is. It's influence. Quiet people also influence. Your presence changes the dynamic of whatever room you're in. Whether it's you not speaking up about something, then let me give you an example. So say we're talking, there's a group of people, we're at a cocktail party.
Okay.
And these people are talking, or you can even say you're at a water cooler at work. You can say you know the people a little bit better, whatever the case is. And someone brings up an issue that is not, they say something you think is rude, or they say something you think is racist or homophobic or misogynistic or just wrong, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
If you do not speak, which is your right, you are still influencing the conversation. That person can imply that you're okay with what they're saying. That is influencing the conversation. But let's say you're not the kind of person who wants to open her mouth to dispute it. Just this.
Do that again.
or just influences the direction of the conversation. That is a quick boundary check for the person who's speaking. Even a person who's oblivious, you don't have to, your face doesn't have to be that exaggerated, because I have a tendency to kind of, I'm all over the place. I'm just a meme waiting to happen. But even if it's just a head tilt or a question where you say, well, what do you mean by that? That is influencing the conversation. You don't have to force them to change their minds.
Mm.
You don't even have to force them to change their language, but you have influenced that dynamic. Now, let's say if she says she's a quiet person, and we take it out of, say, of a conversation. I would like for people to understand that, say, in my work environment, I cherish those quiet people.
Yeah.
You influence the dynamic of the room with that quiet space you have built around you. It is welcoming. It is appreciated. And the main thing is, you don't have to see or hear the influence that you have. I just want you to recognize it so that you don't walk around feeling helpless, because you're not. When I walk into a busy newsroom, it feels like I work in a call center. I am not joking.
Busy.
A concrete,
of course.
Oh, it is ridiculous. It is full of statistically proven ADD people, ADHD people. It's a business that draws it. Mm-hmm. And so you've got all this, and we've got a few quiet people. I'm not joking. They're the most powerful people in the room. One, they bring a certain amount of peace and stability and just lack of noise. And I often let them know, because what happens with, like we said, it was Jean who asked the question, is that those people walk around feeling like they're invisible or that they don't have any influence, and that is not true. Mm. I want them to have that settled understanding that they do.
Yeah, and I do believe that. Thank you for sharing that, and also sharing that you recognize them and give them that, because people do radiate an energy. And when we feel like we have a role, that we're part of the space makers, that we are part of the co-creating the circle, the people that have joined us, even, just one question changed this. It wasn't on video, but it changed it. And there's a bunch of other people saying, thank you. It's exactly the way I feel about me, invisible. We're getting a chance to recognize that when someone is, and this is sort of the power within, if we're not sure that we're welcome, if there's nobody that is looking, feeling, touching, recognizing, respecting the role that our energy plays in the community, then we start to feel invisible. And then I think there's a diminishment, requires an enormous amount of self-generating to stay with your power within when you're being ignored, when you're really not being recognized. And it doesn't take much for us as a circle to recognize each other in the role that we hold. And this is the world that I want to live in, where the person who leaves space or even turns to someone who's quiet, and you can tell that their energy is up, they're in there, there's something rising, right? And they want to offer it, to be able to do more of that, as well as for those who are cultivating that power within, to recognize that even if it's not being spoken, even if you're not on stage or on camera or whatever, that you're playing a potent role in what comes out. Like, I know that you and I talked together, just the two of us, and this conversation with the people that are joining us from probably around the world, it's a different conversation just by their presence. their
Yes,
attention,
it
their
is.
consciousness.
It is. You asked what I'm doing and what I want to do more of, or what I have done to create that space where people feel more comfortable tapping into their own power.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly this. It is, I've decided to make a conscious effort to have people become aware of that inherent power so that they have that steady wellspring of oomph that will help them make it through the day when they would normally feel unnoticed. Because I want them to understand their influence and understand that it is more than okay to be who you are, so that when they walk out of their houses every day, they're carrying that reinforced, solid sense of self, so that they can address whatever is taking place and just kind of they're moving through from that place of comfort. Because there's a woman I've worked with,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't understand the influence I had with basically one conversation. And she has a Post-it note that she posts up above her desk. And she was saying, well, I don't know who I should be and what I should do. And I looked at her, and since it was one of those wonderful times where I was grounded and centered in myself, and I opened my mouth and my spirit spoke, I told her, the most powerful thing you can be is you. And the only thing you need to be in any particular situation is the most appropriate version of yourself for that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Period. And I want people to carry that with them and to know it deep in their souls so that they're solid in it. And then they speak from it, and they act from it, and they live from it, and they love from it.
As you feel into that invitation, what are you noticing in your world and inside of yourself? You did a beautiful TEDx talk. What do you notice are the impediments that are still part of our unsustainable work world to that? Because it's a great invitation, and yet
Yeah.
it's sometimes not met in a way that people don't flinch back into, like, okay, well, so what do you want me to be?
Yeah. Yeah, the whole premise of that talk, the motivation for that talk was the life I led that led me to the point to where I understood that who I was being, that supposedly powerful woman who had won an Emmy and who had won national and regional and local and state awards, she wasn't sustainable because she wasn't me. There were pieces of me that would show up on a somewhat regular basis. But that image I was projecting of that successful, career-oriented, perfect wife, mother person, she didn't exist. She was who I thought I needed to be. She was who I thought I should be and who I thought I wanted to be. And a lot of that wasn't me. And so that rock bottom I hit was a big wake-up call, like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I mean, there were physical, emotional, psychological, just understanding that I just couldn't. And so the main impediment that I have noticed, because once I started talking about that experience publicly, because I've often had this thing where I just kind of share, because I don't want people to think they're alone. There's no need in me pretending to be something I'm not. If that makes you leave the conversation thinking, well, she, doesn't feel alone, or she doesn't feel insecure, or blah, 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 whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And so as I was sharing that experience with people, that I was doing what I thought others wanted me to do so that I would get approval or love or acceptance or whatever it was, that the main problem we have is that we're so trained from a very, very young age to respond to that external stimuli and that external confirmation. And so
Seems
the
like it's
most,
the prime
yeah,
directive as a child. We need to tap
yeah,
into, like, what do I need to do to make mom happy? What do I need to do to be successful in this life and get what I want? And it does seem like there's this gap of being able to transition from being externally referenced to this reframing from within, tapping into that source of power and connection within ourselves, and then sharing it in a way that the benefit for all is
yeah,
clearer,
yeah,
articulated. And yeah, I know that being raised as a white heterosexual male, there were a lot of things that were unsustainable for me. I'm a co-creator at heart. I'm not a boss. And what nearly killed me was to have 20 people who even if I asked them, please don't call me boss, some of them still did, or referred to their, my boss did this, or, and I realized that as success, it was successful, but it certainly wasn't sustainable. And I appreciate you bringing in that. And I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and we talk about permaculture and a lot of other things about sustainability. And a lot of times people drive a lot of power and energy, or at least energy, into something to make it a success or make themselves a success. But that's not a sustainable ecosystem. Whereas, when you're acknowledging that this needs to be of benefit to all, not just the people around the table, but all the stakeholders, the people that are touched by our work, or by our heart, by our words, that there needs to be something that's of nourishment and sustainability in that. And I think a lot of what the reorientation that's happening in the emotional world is around that. It's tapping into, are you trying to do something that really isn't sustainably, it isn't you, which won't be sustainable, but it may be an aspect of you that you've put a lot of pressure on. Like,
yeah.
I'm
Or that you're judging.
yeah, yeah, because you're using that judgment whip to, oh, I needed to be more this, more this, more this, more this, and you are that, but it's like putting a pressure on. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Like, someone takes a gift and they're using their power within, but they're out of balance with it. How does that show up in your experience?
It's interesting. That just showed up for me this past week on a personal note. I've often had people tell me, well, you just make me feel good about my day or my life. And it triggers something from way back young, where I felt responsible. Since I could make people feel good about themselves, then it was my responsibility to make them feel good about themselves. And so then there was this responsibility to be on, or to be perky, or to be happy Anissa, or funny Anissa, or whatever Anissa, makes the room smile or laugh, or whatever the case was. And I woke up and I just was not in the mood. I called it my funky attitude. I was not in the mood. I didn't feel like it at all. And after having lived a life where I became resentful for feeling like I needed to play a role, I realized through all of the different types of work we've done that was not sustainable for me. It was interesting. I made a conscious decision and gave myself permission to be in a bad attitude that day.
It's a powerful word, isn't it? Permission, giving myself permission.
A conscious permission. It was a choice.
I'm wondering if, going back to one of the first things I wrote down that you said, I don't want any part of it. That when we notice, this is a really pertinent example. If there is a model of I am an energy, and people find benefit in that energy, love my dance, they like my smile, they like my jokes, they perceive me as this happy person, and I become this thing in their life. And it's almost like becoming the guru of whatever. There's a
Mm-hmm.
part of me that says, I don't want any part of that. None of the guru stuff, none of that. And yet, if I'm not careful, and you just described to me, you being careful with this, mindful with it, that no, you don't have to be always making someone feel good. You don't always have to be emotionally available. Like,
Right.
I had to really look at, I can be really emotionally available, but not all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I need to be able to be free to go hide under the covers, or to get off grid, or to not answer my emails for 3 days, if that's really where I am. And we talk about the primitive brain in the Thriving Now circles, and I think that's one of the things where the association is positive. This is a good part of me, but then there
Yeah.
comes this pressure. And I love that you're doing it for yourself. That helps maintain the power within. I think there's also that permission, and I hope that everyone else hears that this is for all of us.
It's
If
us, all of us.
get to give ourselves permission to not always be anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the only thing you really need to be is you in every situation. And if I can do anything before I leave this earth, it is to get that understanding truly through. And I don't mean understanding in here, I mean understanding in here.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're being you, then that means that you are honoring what is best for you in each and every moment. And believe it or not, that is what's going to end up being best for everyone else, because the honest you, the real you, is the one they deserve to meet.
Mm.
That's the you who will come up with the best ideas at work. Because often people talk about this. They say, well, how do I take this woo-woo feel-good crap and fit it into my job where I need some practical results? This is how you do it. Understanding that the really powerful you, the one that's not responding to other people, like, okay, is this what I'm supposed to do? Is it not what I'm supposed to do? Am I supposed to be this? Am I supposed to be thinking that? That nobody's powerful coming from that space. But that solid anchoring of who you are, where you're understanding and honoring that, oh, I'm good at this, but I'm not good at this. And so I don't feel this today, I feel this today. So when I'm in this meeting, if it doesn't feel right for me to speak up, no, I'm not going to speak up. I'll speak up at the next meeting if it feels good. All of that benefits you and your company, or benefits you and the people with whom you're in relationship. And it's really the only fair thing to do, because if you're developing relationships based off of a false image, when the real you shows up, when you're ticked off or tired or grumpy, or you don't have your caffeine for the day, then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, who's that?
Who's that? That's scary. What do you mean?
Yeah. And
Janet asked about moods. They do come and go, but there are a lot of us who are sensitive, and the people that are around us and their mood can impact. And it's not necessarily being externally referenced. It's just empathetic.
You're just feeling it.
High sensitive. How does this power within come into play to help a person who is sensitive to other people's moods?
Yeah. Oh, this is where, in one of the central focuses of that TEDx talk I gave is happy hour versus rush hour. Recognizing the physical sensations that come from, oh, that's my yes, as opposed to the physical sensations that come from, oh, that's my no.
Yeah.
And the reason I focus in on the physical sensations is because in our heads, we have all these stories about what we're supposed to be doing, or who we're supposed to be, and what we're supposed to be saying and thinking and feeling and all that. Whereas your body never lies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it never lies. And so as you're tapping into that and acting from that, you're like, whoo, yeah.
That's an interesting connection. Body yes, body no. I'm realizing that if I'm picking up on someone else's emotion, let's say
Mhm.
they're in grief, it can actually be happy hour for me to join them
Yeah.
sometimes. And yet, if I feel compelled to match them,
Hmm.
either in their excitement and their bliss, or in their depression or their frustration over something that's happening in the world, if maybe it's right for me to join them, and there's a body sensation of like, oh, I'm sensitive and I'm joining them. This
Yeah.
is like joining their song. And I'm noticing that as I think about the cases where, let's say someone is really feeling powerful in the dance, and I feel like I'm feeling that resonance of like, oh,
Hmm.
do I do that or not?
Hmm.
If it's a yes, then I'm riding it with them. If it's not, and I start trying to do that, my bones hurt.
Yeah.
It's the body saying, hey, yeah, you're picking up on something, but it isn't necessarily your
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Tap into that power, go within. And I did that this morning. I went within, and my body yes was, hey, let's let them be in their thing and follow my yes.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, well, I wanted to touch on one thing with that, where you were talking about where she said that what do you do if you're empathetic and you feel it? That's where I'm a really, really big fan of practical tools that you keep on standby to
mm,
use. So if you're sensing that, and you're kind of you've gotten to where you understand, and you're paying attention to what your sensation is, and you're thinking, oh, they're really not in a good space, and I feel very sensitive to that right now. I believe in bathroom breaks. Nobody can keep you from going to the bathroom. Okay.
or they'll regret trying.
Oh, they'll regret trying. You can make them regret trying. Truly, like, that's where the consciousness comes in. That's what I want people to understand, is that it's not just all woo woo heartfelt and blah blah blah. It's how it shows up in your physical world when you're making a conscious decision about how you want to live. If you have already thought it through at some point in time, whether it was a course you took or something you heard me say or whatever it was, that if I'm already kind of in a slightly low space,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not helpless. I can escape at some point. You might not be able to escape right now, but you can escape. You can go to the bathroom. If you're afraid that you're going to kind of get into your headspace and lose time, pull out your timer. And yes, I've done stuff like this. Pull
Yeah.
out your timer, set it for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and breathe. But it's the type of thing, when I say conscious living,
Yeah.
with those practical tools that you apply to all the feedback you're getting as an empathetic person, an energetic person walking through this world.
And I'm hearing the the message that is so much a part of, I think, being an emotional world environmentalist is, yeah, take care of yourself and find the things, the outs. Like, I know that I need an exit wherever possible, and
Yeah.
bathroom breaks is one of them. I want to bring up what Janet put in the chat. This is all true, but
Mm-hmm.
when you're working for any company, they expect you
Mm-hmm.
to act a certain way,
Oh
their
yeah.
perceived way. How can we
Yeah.
deal with this when attempting to come from our authentic self?
That's what I meant. I thank you so much, Janet, for saying that, because I get my every other week check. It's every other Tuesday, just in case y'all wonder, from a major corporation.
Yeah.
And no, I can't just fly in there like, any old Anissa who feels like showing up that day. But that's where it comes in, with the understanding of the most appropriate version of you within these parameters.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It's like, if you're going into work, there's a there's a professional range,
Yeah.
And what does it mean to be a pro here? And I admit there are some places that are really rigid, that they're still in the people that work for us are automatons that need to look like just everyone else. And, I can't survive there. They would fire me I would never get my Tuesday paycheck. And then there's that, okay, is there room for people that are deeper, thoughtful, a little bit more wanting things to settle? Like with Kathy and I, Kathy makes great decisions really fast. I can reach the same place and I need a few breaths and sometimes a few days in order to do that. And so like when I've been with people that are very, snap,
it's like,
good.
It makes me feel like I'm like, oh, what?
Wait a minute. Yeah. Whoa. And so that's where I believe we're moving to a place where we can ask, like, is there room here for me to take a half hour to really, so to use your example, I really want this to be of benefit to everyone. And is there room for me to take a half hour to sit with this before I come back with my feedback? Yeah. And, if the show's going on in 2 minutes, the answer to that's probably not. No. And like, I believe that as we're clearer about our authentic self, we start to be attracted to and move into roles, even within the same organization. More of us will start rising that is in balance and sustainable. And then it's less often that we have to do the unsustainable thing. Like I can shovel out my whole driveway, and no, I would not do that every day. My body would be like, ooh, no.
Who are you? And why
I think in business too, there are things that we can do which, arise on an occasion, like launches or special pressures and things. But so looking for what the professional range is. Yeah. And I'll tell you, having worked with a lot of people, like CEOs often feel like they are just as bound by what is expected of them as the person on the line, even though they have so much freedom in a lot of ways, they still answer CEO of
expectations.
And looking for what still allows for professionalism. Yeah. Does that?
It does. And I'm glad you just segued to that, because I wanted to address what Janet was saying, because I wanted to say to her in particular and to everyone else in general, that's why I'm such a big fan of the practical and as a practical step-by-step methodology that I tend to use, even applied to the energetic experience, so that you can live in such a way that you get your check on a regular basis, you even get promotions. Say, Janet, your work environment, the type of people you're going to come across on a regular basis. They're going to pretty much be the same. I mean, there may be off days, but the jerk's going to be the jerk. The blowhard's going to be the blowhard. The goody two-shoes is going to be the goody two-shoes. All those people we met on the playground when we were in elementary school, they're all just in suits and dresses, okay? So we know who we're going to be dealing with. Take some time, look at how your day might play out, and look for those places that bring the most, for me, it's in my chest. It's like and so look for those places and say, okay, how can I address this and perhaps deal with this? And those are the spaces that will give you the most freedom and space to breathe, to where all the rest of the bull doesn't bother you as much. But if all day feels like a bunch of bull and all day feels like, then no, you can't take it. But you can create those pockets of, that makes it all doable. It's just a matter of that conscious living, that conscious decision that you've made before you get there. You're not going to have a map that they're going to say this, I'm going to say that, they're going to say this, I'm going to say that. But it can make it more comfortable for you. And remember, we talked about that. That's where you're tapping into your power most often, is when you're comfortable, because it's not new and it's not something that's in your face that you're not prepared for.
Thank you so much for being here. This is obviously a subject that we're passionate about, and we would love some of your questions and feedback
Yeah,
so that we can incorporate this in this
yeah,
exploration. Support at
absolutely.
thrivingnow.com. You send it to us, and I'll make sure that Anissa
Yeah,
also gets a copy. Anissa, is there some closing comments that you'd like to,
yeah.
or invitation?
I'm going to let people know that one, there's something that I want you to have. My website is www.anissa, ANISSACENTERS.com. AnissaCenters.com. About halfway through, there's a subscribe area, and there's a sheet that I've created, a very practical, heart-centered sheet of how to approach. It's an entry-level approach to having uncomfortable conversations in a way that makes you comfortable. How to talk to anyone. So I invite everyone to, and if you subscribe to it, I won't send you a whole bunch of crap. That's not the way I function. One, I've got too much going on. Number two, I don't want to get a bunch of crap in my inbox. But it's a way for you to get that information, and you can tell me what it is one-on-one that you would like to have more of a conversation about. But the primary thing I want to leave people with is that you don't have to leave the real you at home. There is a place for you in the business world, boardroom, in your, at your church, your synagogue, your mosque, or whether you go to, I don't know, a center or a temple or whatever the case is. It's that we can be very conscious, kind, compassionate human beings. And I want you most of all to tap into your power, because we need those type of people understanding they are powerful, so that those type of people go out and influence the world. That is what I want.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Yeah. Okay. Anissa,
Yeah.
so glad that this has come together. Thank you all for being here. And yeah, till next time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Best of luck. Look forward to hearing from you.